Okay, well, my birthday is the 22nd, so I'm either onyx or carnelian. Depends on, I feel like different zodiacs. Sometimes
that's true.
The 22nd is. So yeah, so Virginia, her PhD is about 19th century like archaeology and geology. So she has a lot of fossils because people are into collecting fossils there. So when you get a lot of money, you're going to go to England, and she'll tell you places you can go, and you can just pick up fossils, like they're literally coming out of the cliffs. That's how.
Actually, yeah. For those joining, we're actually talking about.
Oh,
you're good. No, that's perfect because I like that shit. For those who are joining, we're actually talking about some gemstones because y'all know that's my kind of shit. I've always wanted to do that. My buddy Parker, went to Thunder Bay.
Mm-hmm.
In Thunder Bay, maybe not too far from there.
Where's that? I feel like I've
Canada.
heard of it. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of it because Thunder Bay, they have an amethyst mine.
Mm-hmm.
Amethyst is like one of the most common stones you can get. The most well known as far as like properties. It's the purple one. Everyone knows.
Yeah. Yep.
And that you can go there and mine it and just walk away with tons of cuts and like you pay cheap prices.
I don't think you have to go that far. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, no. That's one place I was thinking of. But no, there's places in Pennsylvania you can go and mine.
Because where I grew up in East Tennessee, I spent a lot of time in Western North Carolina too. Now my accent's going to come out. And wait, can people see me?
Nope.
Oh, we're just audio.
Podcast. Yep. Just audio.
Gotcha. And so yeah, I love Western North Carolina. And I remember as a kid, there were places we'd go and you could find amethyst and other quartz. Isn't it quartz? There were smoky quartz. We would just find it sometimes. And then also in Yancey County, what was the name of the river? There was so much mica, a lot of mica, which is mica.
Yeah.
But for people now, as an auditory medium, I'm not going to describe anything visual, but it was almost like glass. It's sort of layers of whatever that mineral is that will flake off in sheets. And so the water has so much. You go swimming, you come out, and you have like a natural glitter like stuck to your skin.
Oh, that's awesome!
Isn't that beautiful? So that's only 10 hours in Western North Carolina.
Now see, that's dope. Wow.
By car, 10 hours.
Over on my windowsill there. Yeah. Parker, because like we talk all the time.
This is a Parker day.
Yes, definitely a Parker day. He is, when I say just all natural, self-sustainable. When you go into his backyard at his parents' house, there's garden everywhere. And he actually found quartz in his backyard. So he mined it for me and just gave me a bunch of quartz. So now I have that sitting on my windowsill. So I mean that's
cool.
That's really local, right?
Really local.
That's Lancaster County quartz for you.
I know. This is something we were talking earlier about history that as somebody who moved to Pennsylvania, I still want to learn more. I was listening to there's actually a podcast. It's PCN, what is PCN? It's like a cable network.
Sounds so familiar.
It's like, I think it's like Pennsylvania Interest. It's like TV, but there's a podcast, which is their recordings of interviewing authors of books about Pennsylvania.
What?
So, I know, pretty niche. And some of them you're like, do I want a history of golf courses of Northumberland? No. But some were cool. So I think that's where I heard it. It was a woman talking about the first coal in what's called anthracite country, like in Pickle County.
Yes.
And people would walk around. I didn't know this. And Mountaintop is one of the towns.
I lived in Mountaintop before.
Okay, well
I've lived all over Northeast.
You have. You know more than I do. People, I think this was maybe 1820s, 30s before coal was really an industrial. It was just there. People didn't even know that it would burn.
Right.
And like the story she was telling was because you would needed a lot of heat to even ignite it. People were just like, what is this? These big black rocks. And so it was so abundant. And that they basically didn't need to mine it at first. That's one of the reasons that part of Pennsylvania was so early industrialized, because they would just pick it up off the ground, chuck it into a wagon. Yeah. They'd like go down the mountain, and then they had rivers. They would take it down river to Philadelphia.
But see, some of the problem was, and I'm just gonna get into some stuff here because I love telling this stuff because Northeast PA is so beautiful, and when I say beautiful, I mean the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
Beautiful means that you've got scars and bruises on you and you've lived to tell a story another day.
Right.
And so
it's like terrible beauty.
Yes. And the mountains, hills, whatever, it's still covered in anthracite coal.
Mm-hmm.
at this point, obviously, we know how dirty it really is. So there's not much you're going to do with it now. But I still see the beauty in that. Like you could just outside of Hazleton, it's covered in coal fields all around Hazleton.
Right. So including and you know, I think the anthracite, you know, was the I don't know the geology, is the cleaner burning. Around that is all the bituminous, which is the
anthracite coal is the most coveted.
Yeah,
I think it burns the most,
or it's the hottest and the cleanest.
Right.
And I'm sure there's still chunks of it laying around. I think a lot of the veins that they were mining, you know, that was one of the differences. Those were the sort of small mines that would go straight down.
Eventually, I guess they started mining under the river.
Yeah.
And that's what caused a lot of problems. So my guess, I don't know, this is a theory, but my thoughts is that probably a lot of the more sought after coal is the one that's under the riverbeds.
Right.
And that's also what's contributed to the Susquehanna having such poisonous.
That's right. Because in fact, this is where I was going with picking up anthracite was, you know, often they wouldn't cap those. Like I know this from Northumberland County, which is near me. So that basically is just, if you picture like Swiss cheese, there are all these holes.
Yes.
Literally. Yes. And so the water would go down and then wash out through the watershed and hit the creeks. So two quick fun stories. So one is, I did a little tour in Northumberland County of trying to do some cleanup and reclamation. And the guy giving the tour was talking about, even up to today, there are some like locals who have like the family like hidden mine, and they'll go get their coal for the winter, right? Like some people go hunt a deer.
What?
I know, isn't that crazy? And they're called like wildcat mines. They're not, and they won't say where they are because they don't want it to be regulated.
Exactly.
So they're not great that they're there because they contribute to the problem. But I love the idea that it's like, you know, hey,
without a doubt,
you know, hey Billy, go get the coal.
It's such Pennsylvania culture, and like that's what I mean about the beautiful of the good, bad, and the ugly. Like,
and so here's a beautiful part. So there's Carl Kirby. I'll find a link for you. He's a geology professor at Bucknell, where I used to teach. He, as a project, figured out how to. I don't remember the exact thing, but there was something in the runoff that's not good, and he figured out how to extract it and then how to make it a pigment. Right. What? So there would be, and his own, like, I don't know if it ever took off, but he had like the patent, and he had his own, like a VW bus painted in this color that was kind of a cool, like kind of a brown orange, you know, like I think that had to do with like, you know, it didn't look like rust, but it was a kind of a beautiful, like, you know what I mean? Kind of a burnt orange. So I'll have to find that because I know there was media about it. So yeah. Anyway, so here we are.
All right. We're sitting here connecting about Pennsylvania life.
This is the third or fourth time we've done a show. You've been on ours some.
I know.
First time IRL. In vivo. In vivo, we should say.
For real.
That sounds better in Spanish.
It's, you know what, and it's been a long time coming for me because there's so many people that I've wanted to connect with, but you're one of the people on the top of my list that I feel like we could talk for like hours and have so many topics to talk about. We have tons of material.
We just spent like 2.5 hours.
I know, going from issue to issue.
Let's see if we can get you a sponsor. We had brunch at the Breakfast Peddler.
Seriously,
it was pretty good.
I could use some sponsors, guys.
Yeah.
Real quick though, I want to give some plugs out, and then if you're watching, make sure you are subscribing to my channel. Go ahead to Facebook and follow that channel as well, and shoot over to Instagram. Check out the clips that we have there and follow our Instagram. And if you are currently listening, make sure you go over to
Barnstorming PA.
Yes,
that's our podcast. Our being Taylor and me are the co-producers. Then we have a pretty big, I think you do too, like we like to have a set of people who come in, you know, part of it's because Taylor and I have spent something, we know what we're going to say.
Right.
You know, like, I don't want to listen to this guy. I need Jontel. I need John.
Now that that I agree with, because I need someone else to work with. Like when I feel like I'm by myself, sometimes I don't know how y'all feel about me, but like I only feel like I have a purpose, or I know what the fuck I'm gonna say when I have news to talk about, because that stuff grinds my gears and I know where I'm going with it. But if I have just a topic on my dome, I'm gonna say my piece and then leave it at that, and it's just like silence. But if I have someone I'm talking to, we can go back and forth and work off of each other. Yeah. So I never know what I'm gonna say then. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. I like having that unpredictability. Yeah.
Can I curse?
Yes.
So
curse all you want.
You know, I may seem like a nice guy, but I'm actually a dick, right? Because like, and we're probably maybe mutually explaining each other, because I'm like that too. And so I need you. I did this to you over brunch where I had an idea. I probably sounded like I was half baked on something. I wasn't, but like I need a person to sort of, because things are in my head and I would like start talking about it. And then when it comes out, I'm like, oh yeah, including, well, I don't want to say that, but anyway, so, you know, it may seem nice, but I'm really an exploitive dick. Like I used you.
No, I do the same thing. It's no, we're on the same page.
So if we're mutually exploiting each other, is that a form of mutual aid, mutual exploitation?
I would agree. I would completely, yes, we're in agreement on
Some
that.
anarchist somewhere, their head is exploding. Rebecca, right? You know who you are if you're hearing this. We hope you'll still be friends.
You know what? That's what I've come to like not even disclose with people, but also be very open about.
That's right.
Because they're like, "Are you going to interview me?" And I'm like, "I did."
Well, I actually want to get 100 with you in a second about that because I have to think a little bit about how to frame this because there is a little bit of privacy. Do you know if there are people following? Do you encourage people to make questions or comments when it's live?
I do. Rarely people do. Unless they're like, I don't know who watches from YouTube. Yeah. I have a lot of new viewers from YouTube. I don't know who
it's those algorithms.
Yep.
That's a whole other thing. So so back to my story, because I'm curious your perspective, both as a friend and also, you know, coming from being a person of color and queer. I'd say that. Okay.
I've talked about deep dark secrets on here.
Like, oh shit, I didn't out somebody.
Oh no.
So I have a friend of the family, right, who's in college, and so let's say that this is Larry. So Larry had a really close friendship with Rosa, let's say, and yeah, like, you know, I don't know what the term is for the kids, you know, dating, but not partners, whatever. So so Larry's very creative and had developed some ideas, you know, on their college campus to like kind of combine like art and poetry and like community. And so we were talking a little about salons, a little bit like that idea of like the salon culture, right, of people coming together. And so it was like very intentional, and was going to do it in Larry's dorm room. And so Rosa, like, and these were some ideas that Larry had for a long time before he knew Rosa. So then Rosa like was, you know, part of those conversations. And then recently they had a big conflict because Rosa was like, and Rosa's like, you know, part Korean American, like half Korean or whatever. She's one parent Korean, one parent white.
Okay.
And so she was like, hey, like, I actually think Larry, who's, you know, white, you know, on the binary, you know, on the non-binary continuum, but like can pass as white and like, you know, would never say that he's not. So Rosa said, like, I feel like you're using your privilege and you're exploiting me because like we talked about the salon idea a lot, and you know, you appropriated, you sort of took my ideas and you're using it for yourself, and you didn't give me enough credit, and well, it ended the relationship, right? Where was I going with this? And so like, and then Larry was also like, I don't even know if I can do this now. Like, it was on a college campus, so it was like a close community. Like, now, you know, Rosa could go around and say like if I continue with this project, I'm just making this up, the name, but let's say it was like, you know, the community cafe. If I go forward with this community cafe, like, you know, Rosa could go and say like, I stole her idea, and like, so I'm getting at this like thing, like, and Larry's the family friend, so I'm not unbiased, but like, for sure, Rosa has a point, which was, you know, she did contribute through conversation. There wasn't like an agreement. There wasn't like there was money on the table where everybody like they had invested.
Nobody had a disclosure of a conversation about intellectual property.
They didn't, but like, you know, like you and I, right? Like, we didn't have that. So yeah, like there is a thing about intellectual property, and for sure, there's a lot of, especially, you know, both white people and say white society, that exploits all kinds of people, including lots and lots of Black culture and other people of color. So I you know, like, it'd be easy to be like, oh well, Rosa's a bad person and Larry was unfairly targeted, or to turn it around. Some people would be like, who's this guy Larry? You know, because I know the situation. I know that it's not like, it's not 100% clear that like there was an idea that they jointly had and then Larry took it and said it was his own. So there was a theme to this, right? This thing about, I was joking about mutual exploitation, but like in this situation, like, do you think it feels a little weird to be like, okay, like for you and me right now, be like, okay, like, I don't want to say this on your podcast because it's my idea. Like, until we write down on a piece of paper that this next thing I'm going to talk about, we're going to split the revenue. That would feel a little.
Yeah.
But is that what you're suggesting, that we should, like, you and I, or in general, we should be more careful? I don't have a good answer.
No, I don't either. I don't have a concrete answer because this whole podcast, John, I'm gonna say John because that's what the fuck it is. It's the Wild West.
Did you see
John? Jawn.
Is that a PA word that I'm supposed to know?
It's a Philly term.
Okay. I've seen it written.
It can be a place, person, or thing.
I've seen it written. Thank you for educating me. Now I know how to pronounce it.
It's you can throw in thing and
John.
John is another word for thing.
Rhymes
Person,
with
place,
yawn.
or thing. Yes, yawn, John.
John.
Some people say jaunt. They put a T on it.
John.
It depends on where you are in the southeast of Pennsylvania, but we all use it. But this whole shebang,
By the way, I've never lived in that part of PA, so I feel like I get a pass. I've lived in the Lehigh Valley and where I live now, so I get a pass, right?
I mean, you might get people use jaunt in Lehigh Valley, but certain pockets, and
they're Philly transplants.
Right, exactly. That's my point. This is a very Wild West kind of terrain.
Right, it is.
And I think that when you find people in your lane, or even if they're on another side of the sphere,
right,
but you find complementary features within one another, it's a mutual understanding.
Right.
So you can take and do with the material as you please.
Right.
But when you're connecting with someone and networking with someone as a guest and you don't know where they lie with things,
right,
it can be a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
For example, I had an episode last week, right?
That was a very dramatic sip from your mug that has a J on it.
Oh, yes,
Is it a John mug?
Totally a John mug. Totally.
Because that is the place where the things happen.
Seriously, I am so like, this is one of those Johns. Like, this is one of those things that is,
it's a good
solely
word.
The Leon block. Yes. Yeah. What was I saying?
You had a podcast last week.
So yeah, I had a podcast last week that was about the R. Kelly verdict. And yeah, it was very.
This is really a moment. I don't know if I can say this. You're gonna need to black explain this for me, or you explain, because I don't know what it's about.
Yeah. Okay. So we jumped into it. Like, when I say first of all, it was a 2.5 hour.
I know that R. Kelly is a performer, and I know that something happened.
Right. So I'm going to give you a cliff notes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm going to compare it to some other things.
And thank you for being gentle.
Of course. I'm going to give you two names in comparison with R. Kelly.
Okay.
Bill Cosby.
Wait, can I guess the other one? Harvey Weinstein.
There we go.
Really?
Okay, perfect. I was going to say Charlie Sheen, but that's a perfect example. So the picture I'm trying to paint here is, take R. Kelly out the equation. Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein.
Right.
Perfect example of what's going on. You take race and throw it in the matter. Why is Harvey Weinstein at the back of the things and Cosby at the front, and everyone's jumping on Cosby's back? Cosby's just as guilty as Weinstein. I'm not saying that he's not. The point that I'm trying to make is, why is the black guy being thrown to the wolves and being the poster child for reprimanding, when there's so many other celebrities that are white, mind you, that are still benefiting and profiting off of the bad publicity surrounding this, and no one's batting an eye?
Because off the top of my head, Weinstein's never been criminally charged.
No. Charlie Sheen has infected tons of women with HIV and AIDS, and no one's batting an eye, and he's still profiting off of the money that he's made from 2.5 Men and other things. Whereas Cosby, his whole image and his whole career has been completely washed clean.
Right.
So taking that back to R. Kelly has completely, he didn't go, he wasn't mainstream, he wasn't pop. Yes. So R. Kelly is known in the R&B world mostly, and in the black world mostly, right? And so, are you familiar with Aaliyah? Aaliyah is,
I feel like I look really bad.
Oh no, it's okay. So Aaliyah is like, she was my idol. We have the same birthday. She was born 10 years before me. She was a young singer.
ALIYAH?
Yes, she was a young singer, R&B singer in the 90s. She died in 2000 from a plane crash. Yes, she was in a plane crash, died very young and early at the height of her career, and she's still highly regarded in the industry today because she was such a very humble and personable person. No one had anything bad to say about her. But she was a survivor of abuse, and it's highly documented and well known now. But because of her family and how people rallied around her, and the the very kind soul that she was, it wasn't. No one wanted to talk about it at the time. And she was also and she was young. But now I think it's at that point, and he's facing so much shit. It's something that we do need to talk about, right? So I was abused. I was molested when I was younger. I was raped in my 20s. I am a person of color. I am queer. All these intersections have made it an uphill battle for me to break free and talk about all these things. Thankfully, I always have been very courageous and don't give a fuck. I came out when I was 12, so like I've always just been ahead of the curve. Let me just do this. I'm fearless in that regard, not in some other regards. Cool. But the thing is, some of these victims of R. Kelly are not so bold, are not so courageous, and their parents are not either. So in this culture of, in the Black world, so to speak, you've got a person like R. Kelly that is held to high regard, almost in a sense of like Michael Jackson. And some people don't care what he does wrong. They will completely support him just because he's a Black man that's successful. They will ignore everything else, even if they know that it's wrong. Also, and this is not just a race thing, every culture has levels of abuse that are ignored or made to dismiss or guilt trip the victim for fear of like not wanting that family's legacy to be stained or anything along those lines. And so you've got so many Black families that don't want to talk about that. It's part of our culture. What about these victims that have not spoken up or have been brainwashed to not speak or brainwashed to think that what they're involved in with R. Kelly is okay? He's done so many horrific things, from urinating on girls in a videotape that came out in the early 2000s.
I was going to say, I remember that.
I was like 14, 15 when I heard about that, when that first came out.
And just to, like, you're saying a lot of things that I think are like really valuable. It's the kind of thing that, like, I think people want to hear. Like, I'm going to say, white people want to hear that, you know, there are these different standards, and like sometimes the Black community there may be a norm around, we need to rally around, and because for very valid reason, there's been singling out, like the Bill Cosby versus Weinstein, and that may lead to, I think what you're saying, I don't put words in your mouth, is like not raising up the victims or not listening to victims when they should be. I was going to say something that I think maybe is not directly parallel, but somewhat similar, is like with the Boy Scouts in the Catholic Church, right? Where it wasn't about obviously a racial or ethnic group, but it was a different kind of group where there was a kind of circle the wagons, right? Anyway, gymnastics.
Exactly. No, you're perfect. You're perfectly right. We end up talking about the accuser or the fame of the whole case in totality, and not to say we should put the focus on the victims at all, because they don't need that focus. They're already traumatized as it is. But we should put the compassion and the bolstering up and the uplifting to them, for them. And we don't put enough focus and emphasis on that. And with this specific thing, you know, we like to focus on Hollywood and those celebrities, but we don't focus enough on the horrible culture that perpetuates this whole narrative and the evils of it. We sensationalize the story without doing anything to offer solutions or rectify the actual problem. And so that's kind of where I was getting at with this podcast, was to try and...
You didn't tell me the verdict.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna get there.
Okay.
To decipher through and work through these issues as a people. So I had one person, it was a little panel, me as a person that's been through this kind of stuff, and a victim, a survivor, if you will. And then I had another older Black woman in her 50s who's a survivor herself, more of a spiritual healer, tarot card reader type of person. Then I had a white Gen Xer, LGBT, former Amish that was escaped from that world, that was also abused and a survivor.
This is also just sort of a beautiful, Pennsylvania.
Yes, and we all gave our perspective.
I also want to give you snaps for saying Gen X, because like this is not a big thing, but I feel like we're the generation that nobody ever names.
I know, and I'm very keen on that, because
you're a little on the bubble between millennial and Gen X.
I am. But anyway, I have more of an understanding, put it that way. But you had mentioned a comment before I broke down.
R. Kelly, the verdict. You had the podcast.
Yes. So the point was to start with the verdict.
Right.
He was sentenced, I believe, to second degree something.
Okay.
So anyway,
there was
he's
a
gonna
sentencing.
he's gonna be behind bars for it, but they're not done yet. There's other locales that still
Right.
have yet to charge him because they wanted to put the bigger one up in front.
Right.
I guess because they had more charges along with it, but there's still like racketeering charges and like mafia type structures that he orchestrated,
right?
That other people play parts in too that they haven't even gotten to. This was solely about, I think, like the abuse and stuff that he committed himself,
right?
But other things like the podcast that I did, one person kind of played from one aspect, the other person played on another aspect. One of the things to touch on was that, like, in this whole Hollywood thing, yeah, the person that committed these crimes is by all means definitely super guilty and horrible and needs to be put behind bars, but there's other people that went along with it that play a part and should be penalized in some capacity too.
In the R. Kelly case?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a lot of people that witnessed
the enablers.
Exactly. And I'm not to say that I want to put focus completely on them, but they're a big component to the story too. Even like the parents that like took their daughters backstage to be groupies and let their daughters be like basically kidnapped by him. He would leave girls locked in rooms for days and days, and they couldn't eat or go to the bathroom when they wanted to. They had to ask and request for this service.
I mean, I'm a parent. I'm like shaking my head because I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But you know, that's the kind of thing. I don't want to distract you, but just going
good.
back to like Cosby, maybe in the 80s or 90s, you know, took a lot of shit, maybe rightly, for, you know, being one of these, you know, I'm an elder black man and I'm going to call out the youngins for, you know, pants too low or whatever, or you need to, you know, speak, you know, not, I don't know, whatever it was, that kind of stuff. I'm not saying you were doing that, right? But you were saying like there's some responsibility for these other people, and that's a nuanced point, which I don't want to get ahead of where you're going, but like both things can be true, right? Both things can be true that well, I was going to say something else. There's a double standard around Cosby or R. Kelly and how they're treated by the judicial system compared to Harvey Weinstein or other people. And there were these enablers that need to be held accountable. Is that, I didn't want to steal your thunder.
Yes, no, you're right. And the point that I'm making is all of these issues are a microcosm of the greater issues, but these are things that the Black communities, we need to figure out on our own without the pouncing of everyone else in the mainstream media trying to sensationalize this story as a testament to the greater story. No, y'all leave us alone. Let us figure this out while y'all are figuring out the same very thing at the same very time.
Like the Catholic Church.
Yes, the
Which
Catholic Church, Harvey Weinstein, all those issues as well. Right, but those are issues that need to be focused on too. Why are you focusing on our little community's issues? Because they're the same issues.
And now to bring in another thread, and I don't know if we've made this too complicated, but you know, I think it also, something we were talking about offline before a little bit is, and I appreciate what you're saying about where's the conversation happening and also kind of who's facilitating or focusing it, because if it's Black owned media or outlets or Black controlled or multicultural, having those conversations, right? That's different than like whatever CNN or NBC coming in and saying this is how it needs to be talked about. And for me, this goes back to our brunch conversation a little bit, going from having been somebody who like read news and consumed stuff to being honestly first a blogger earlier, like in maybe 15 years ago, more recently podcast. Like I can't stand watching most mainstream news because I get so frustrated about like, why are you framing it this way, or why are you gatekeeping? Like if I have to read or watch journalists talking to each other about what voters think, and I'm like, go talk to a voter.
Thank you.
You know, I don't know if I took this too far.
No, you're perfectly right. I like to just follow the stream. So
are we going to get back to Larry Roasted? Because we had the thing here about you had the three people and who owns the content.
Hold up. Well, who?
So R. Kelly, we got onto this story because I said, tell me what you think about this situation about with the family friend who are, they're young people, where one was saying you appropriated my ideas and that person's what?
So,
and you said it reminds me of my podcast. Can you bring it back? Can you tie the 17 threads together?
I can always tie threads together. So now, for example, this particular issue, this particular situation, I feel like I'm the only one touching on this.
The R. Kelly.
Yeah.
And all the different pieces that you laid.
By all means, people need to piggyback off of our stuff. Independent media, we need to be looking out for each other. Mainstream media, you get the same story verbatim.
It's
We've all seen
unbelievable.
those clips on YouTube of every news station across the country saying the same thing because they're a part of the same corporation.
And also, as we move to this, this has been said by many people, but starting with CNN, whenever that was, I think in the late 80s or early 90s, but like news is on all the time and says less things. Like, how can that be? It's unbelievable.
But us, I don't care how much piggybacking and exchanging or cultural appropriating we're doing. And I don't get me wrong, I don't like cultural appropriation, but in this wild west of the independent media realm, cultural appropriate all the fuck you want because it creates more dialogue for people to have and more learning for people to have. I don't care what you do. Bad publicity is good publicity and creates content.
So I think I don't want to pat myself on the back too much. You tied 16 of the threads. Here's the 17th.
Go ahead.
Because what I said to Larry, the family friend, was like, look, at the end of the day, you're in this space, and it's a somewhat similar, like creating things.
Yeah.
And if you've been transparent about your motives, about your method, and about where this is going, like you should put your head down and sleep at night, and you don't need to exit the space, right? Like if you're in my mind, for this person, if you're a white cis male, and you're authentic about all those things, that doesn't mean that you're gonna like not do this. So I'm trying to say, like, I'll just say it this way: it's not cultural appropriation if you're transparency about who you are, where you're coming from, your methods, and the outcomes, right? If you're like, hey, come on to my podcast or my video or be a part of my play, and then you go off and make some money about it, and you didn't have an honest conversation, even going back, like. I've been involved where, like, with things I've created where I was like, somebody was not involved, and we were like, look, let's put this on paper. Like, we're moving on. Are you cool? And they're like, yeah, right.
The only thing I say along with that is, like, cite where those things come from, or cite that you're starting things from this point, but this is where this isn't where it began. But other than that, yes, completely. Like, the only issue I have with cultural appropriation is the fact of, like, just saying you created this. This is it. When there's a whole wealth of knowledge out there that shows otherwise. That's the only bone I have to pick with that.
See, because one of the things is like, and it's a difficult dance sometimes, right? But like, as an American, and I put that in air quotes because you can't see it, but like, I know some people on the left who like would say like, oh, I could never say that, and I'm like, I understand that, but I'm like, it's what you said earlier about the beautiful tragedy of it, right? Like, for me, it's like, I can own being patriotic for me as a lefty and progressive, because it means all of it, right? It means the Christiana massacre, which you just told me about, the Paxton boys, like that's America too.
Yes.
And shit, look at this. So like,
you were pointing out a 17th tie-in.
Well, that was the 17th tie-in was the difference between cultural appropriation and, let's say, going back to, I was joking about mutual exploitation. I don't want to say that. Difference between, like, if we could make a category, I like to make categories. So there's cultural appropriation, and then there's this other thing, which let's call it like, collaboration, cultural collaboration. Right. So in collaboration, you're literally co-laboring, right? And I would say, I hope that we're doing this. Even before that started, I was like, hey, could I also put this on my channel? And you're like, yeah, totally. So cultural appropriation is when, you're using relationships and or cultural, like, content, and you're literally exploiting or extracting all the value just for yourself. And then going back to what I said, you haven't been transparent about your motives, your method, and the outcomes. Right. That's the line, right? And so a little bit for the Larry Rosa thing, I was trying to say, like, Rosa, you may never see eye to eye with Rosa about what happened, and it's messy, right? Like, we're not going to have conversations. I don't want to live in a world where I'm never going to talk to Jontel or other people who are different from me, because maybe I'm not allowed to, or I might appropriate. Like, if I always feared appropriation, then I'm stagnating.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think for you too, right? Like, because you reach out, you're a bridge builder, and that's why I was interested in what you were doing in your older show.
The thing with cultural appropriation, I think, is, like you said, something that people shouldn't shy away from and shouldn't be scared of. Just understand that there's going to be mistakes made and some uncomfortability and weird moments, but it's necessary, completely necessary, to have that uncomfortability and to have those moments of quote unquote cultural appropriation. Because mainly for white people, there becomes more of an understanding of where we all fit in, you know, and the more that these conversations are had, the less problematic it'll be for us. We won't have as many of these conversations after a while. We'll know where things fit, you know.
I do feel like I'm replaying this in my head, and I don't want to sound like I'm saying, especially if you're a white person, the sky's limit, go do whatever you want. Like you definitely need to, I think it's incumbent on white allies to like have a lot of check-in moments with yourself, like, why am I doing this? You know, why am I doing this? You know, where's this coming from? And then there's this thing, and this conversation is so fun because I've had this thought, and I've mentioned it to a few people, but it's like, if I heard you right, it's like those conversations, the cultural collaboration, which I'm really in love with that term now.
Right.
Like, so let me put it this way. For a lot of like well-meaning white people, it's valuable to them for that to happen, right? For them to have those intersectional conversations, be it across race lines, culture, sometimes religion, other things. But let's stick with just race, right? Basically, it's like this. Every well-meaning white person needs a black friend.
Yep.
And there aren't enough black people. There's a number, right?
Yep.
And that's the thing that a lot of white people maybe forget or whatever. And so I have black friends and allies and collaborators who've been like, you know, versions of this, like, it's not on me to educate white people, or, you know, I'm tired, or, you know, and I try to be very like, oh, I get it. And I don't know how to say this without sounding corny, but you can hit the corny alarm, you know. And I'm open about this. Where I grew up in Tennessee, not a lot of black people. Sort of normally the neighborhood I lived in, no black people. The school I went to, 100 graduates, literally no black graduates. I didn't have a black teacher until I was in college. So my life as an adult, as a, you know, somebody who's involved in lefty and progressive things, has been very enriched by getting to know, you know, black allies, collaborators, co-workers, and friends. So like I become aware that, like, wow, like I hit the diversity jackpot.
Yeah.
But like, could my experience be replicated? Because that means, like, you know what I'm saying? At the numerical level, every white person needs one black friend, and then every black person is going to have, like, I'm doing the numbers in my head.
Right.
If we write off 50 million racist white people as irredeemable, or 30 million, so I'm doing this 250 million.
That's a good way of looking
40,
at it.
I think it's 7 or 8 white friends.
Yeah.
That's just that's a burden. And there are some black introverts, which means that they only get one. Oh, you're an introvert. And now the poor black extroverts.
But the thing is, for me, this is the way that I see it.
Think about it that
way?
It
is. But you know what? There are some that are going to have to pick up that slack, like people like me,
yeah,
because there are others that just don't have the patience or to pick up with aggression or frustration or prejudice towards other white people, understandably so.
Yeah, no.
So my thing is, having shit like this, I'm not directly speaking to someone and taking my energy out of. I'm venting about the stuff that I'm frustrated about, and people can pick it up and soak it up as they please. So I'm not actually literally giving my energy and being tired. Educating a white person,
it's little,
it's there, and it just feels like I'm just letting out frustration.
And going back to the independent media thing, it's not it's like one of the great things about podcasts, I think, compared to other forms of media, especially podcasts, is somebody said this in something I heard. It's like when it's in your ear, especially, I feel like for me, it is kind of intimate. Like even though I'm not talking to the person on the podcast I love, you feel like you're in a conversation.
Yes.
Right. So that's a great point.
I like doing my video interviews. They're great, but I don't need people to see my face. I like it for the people to see the reactions on my face. I'm very animated with my facial expressions. I can be just
vouch for that. He's very animated.
I am. I know I am. But I can be just as animated with my voice when I know and when I'm really passionate about what the fuck I want to say. So I can get that to convey across, especially when I'm working with someone else and we're feeding off that energy. You feel that energy through the screen. You can pick up that energy, so it does not matter if you're seeing my face or not. Yeah.
I was going to say about that earlier, among the different, you know, we all have different, like, little facets of, if we're all a gem, we've all got many, many facets. I did some stand-up comedy a little bit, so like totally amateur, which was really awesome.
I could totally see it.
Yeah, but I also got to do a little bit of improv, and I like that way more because maybe I'm lazy, but it's like, I'm like, because like when I was doing it like through the week, I'd sort of jot down ideas or sort of polish jokes, and you have to repolish them. And I'm very much like, what's the bright shiny object, right? So like in a conversation, so the podcasting energy taps into that. So I'm like, if where I live, I wish that like it had continued, and I don't even know if there ever would have been an audience. I didn't need a lot of audience. I just really enjoyed getting to do the like improv piece. But there's an expression, I was trying to remember this earlier, and I may have to track it down because I'm going to forget. And it's like, it's about this. It's like people tend to, I'm probably made a hash of this. It's like, basically it's like, how can I know what I'm thinking until I see what I'm saying? Like it inverts it, right? That we often, especially I think you and I are, what we're doing is, we don't really know what we're thinking until we say it, which is an inversion of sort of the normal model. People assume that like thoughts are formed in the head and then the mouth is just sort of a channel. But the reality, even probably for most people, they may not realize it is, they don't even know what they're thinking until they see what they're saying. I may not have you get the feel for it. Anyway, there's something I've always held on to.
You're so right, because I'm big on this. And for people who have watched previous podcasts, y'all know I'm big on affirmations. Yes, it is true that you think what you create, but you also speak things into existence.
Yes.
So when you're speaking something, like you say, like a lot of times we're trying things out and we're speaking things, we figure out what may work only after we speak it.
My blog that I did that was kind of a version of content creation was called The Nets We Weave.
Right. That's so true.
And it comes partly, and I'd have to track it down. Weber, who's a German sociologist that I like a lot. I borrowed it from him because this is a paraphrase, and not that he was in fact, he was not a poetic writer in general. Very few sociologists are, but basically saying, we as humans live in worlds of meaning that we weave into existence. And so even though things like it was important for me, and this may be a bit nerdy, but like numbers, economics, even sociology, counting up numbers or things to sides, and like that's a classic thing, like that's a reality, but we can never divorce ourselves from, to me, our fundamental existence as meaning-making creatures, right? And that leads all the way back into the media and all of that stuff. So,
seriously,
that was a little free PhD knowledge.
I purposely like to drive and get lost so that I can, for one, find somewhere new, discover a new place, but also find my way home.
Yes.
And I think that's very indicative of
that. Could be another kind of, blog you do. I also want to give a shout out. I don't know if you remember this, because I said blog, I meant podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like the video works. So now I'm totally changing direction.
Perfectly fine.
So when you put up a video, you call it a podcast?
I call it a podcast, but
right.
If I do like an interview with my face and everything,
right,
I tend to call it just an interview.
Because there was a brief moment, do you remember this, where like blogs were blogs, and then people started to kind of do video journals.
Blogs.
Yes. And I was about to say, I'm really glad that word didn't catch on. Because as somebody who loves words and the sounds of words, I was like, that's really ugly. Even blog is like, it sounds like.
I know. I don't even know what to call it anymore. I don't like using those terms either. Like I tend to settle on platform.
Yeah, because I think to me,
podcast, it's a word at all.
Yeah. I can't even remember. Oh, because of iPods, of course. I was like, where did podcast come from? Duh. I'm pretty sure that's the origin.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. It's funny because blog by itself is not a pretty word, but it works, and it had a reason. It was that weblog.
Oh.
It was a shortened form of weblog.
Makes
blog.
Sense.
But blog does sound like something from a bad sci-fi, like, oh no, here come the blogs. But it settled better. Vlog, for some reason, just really, I don't know.
And see, that's what I'm going to start getting back into, because like the Leon blog covers a lot of things. But with like personal stuff, I am going to create a video diet to post. I'd rather use that than vlog.
Yeah, for sure. No, vlog is not making a comeback, and I hope that we didn't start something horrible here. Like, I don't know if this will make sense. I heard something talking about this, that horrible spill in California.
So
here's where I'm going. So a vlog, I was like, I hope we didn't sort of accidentally release Godzilla, right? And did you hear this? Like, I heard this on a podcast that oil spill was caused, like the cause was something like scraped the bottom of the ocean and like tore up the pipeline, literally.
I did hear that, yeah.
And the joke I heard from John Lovett was, who's on Love It or Leave It, giving credit, but he was like, whoa, Godzilla, like, and yeah, right. I was like, that is so funny.
Oh shit.
I mean, it was probably an anchor, but that is kind of like the beginning of a movie, right? Like, there's the underwater cameras, like, what tore up the pipeline?
Shit.
Oh, there's a footprint. There's a big ass footprint, and it's like, you know, we create apocalyptic monster things. So I don't know. I feel like we've come to a resting point.
Wowza, yeah, we're at 45 minutes.
That's the perfect.
That's literally perfect. So awesome sauce. You guys can always subscribe. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel.
What about Patreon? Can they go to that now? Is it set up?
It's set up, but there's no content.
Oh,
so
they could become patrons. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna become a patron.
Actually, yeah, you can become a Patreon subscriber. I will go ahead and post a link to the comments very shortly, because that's something I am going to get into. I need to build a following for that. I do have tons of material that I know y'all would definitely be interested in seeing, so stay tuned for that. Actually, in the meantime, keep up with the Facebook and the YouTube. Subscribe, follow, share, and like.
And TikTok
and Instagram and Twitter. I'm on all the platforms.
Are you also on Snitfest? That's a new platform where people go and they just have snits. I just made that up.
I was gonna say, you saw my serious face, like thinking. Like,
I know, it sounded good, didn't it?
It kind of did, actually, but you know, they have words like Twitch and WhatsApp.
Yeah,
so.
But it's spelled SNTFST. There's no vowels, so it looks very Silicon Valley. You can see, you saw a little hint of the comedian, right? I should brush off some of my jokes.
Yeah, no. While you're at it, drop your plugs again.
Oh, mine. Well, first of all, thank you. This was so much fun, and I got to see a little bit like Dumbledore's office. This is kind of like where all the potions. There's lots of tools and gadgets that, like, if you're the student, you're like, what does this do? What is I forget the name of the liquid pool, the pensieve. I feel like there might be a pensieve in here. That's shout out to Harry Potter fans. No, thank you. So you can find me. I'm on Twitter, Jordi Sunshine. That's a fake nickname. By the way, that's not my real nickname. That's a funny story. Barnstorming PA is the podcast I do with Taylor and a lot of other people. Jontel is a returning champion, we'd like to say.
Yes.
Also, the Hub for Progress is where I do a lot of organizing work. So please check out any of those things. And if I can, last thing, my wife is Virginia Zimmerman. She has a book coming out in January called Pink. It's a picture book. It's about making hats. It's about girls and women and power and protest and community. So PINK Pink, Virginia Zimmerman. Thanks.
Appreciate you for coming on the show.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for filling in those plugs. It's always a pleasure to have friends and family join in, share their experiences, share their point of views on life.
Turning up the music, that's very pro.
Always you have to build up the ambiance, and this podcast is always a vibe. I like to make sure that we're either hype, we're calm, we're invested in what we're saying, what we're hearing, what we're talking about, what we're feeling. It's always important. So again, make sure y'all follow, like, subscribe, and share, and go over to Barnstorming PA and check out Jordi and Friends information as well. Stay tuned. Have a great day, y'all. Be safe. Leon. Blah.